Hello guys, I hope you're all doing well, and hope you're all excited for every episode of The Simpsons, Season 36, reviewed. I know I am. Genuinely, I am quite excited to do this video. The season's just finished a few weeks ago, and I was waiting until it was done so I could binge watch it for this review, and that's becoming a yearly tradition for me now. I guess that's something I can thank this channel for. It means I can still find a way to keep The Simpsons somewhat relevant in my life without getting burned out on it. I have seen 0 of these episodes and know next to nothing about them, so this will be my blind, unbiased review of this series' latest endeavours. As ever, if you enjoy the video, please help me out with a like and subscribe. I do appreciate any support you guys give me. I don't want to wait anymore, so let's just get into it. Starting out, we have Season 36, Episode 1, Bart's Birthday. Conan O'Brien hosts a special AI-generated episode of The Simpsons. Touted as the series finale, Bart's 11th birthday leads to major changes to the status quo. My trivia for this one is the Fox special presentation intro is a reference to the CBS special presentation intros. And my best moment was Bart being able to overcome and change the story ChatGPT wrote. So the season opener cum finale gets a 3 out of 5. This was somewhat interesting and an okay watch, but nothing more than that. I say that because the fan response to this episode was very positive overall, so it feels like I'm being a bit of a party pooper, very much like Bart rejecting his 11th birthday. Now, in the interest of fairness, I can see the appeal. Bringing back Conan O'Brien was kind of neat. He was hosting this fake series finale, written by The Simpsons version of ChatGPT, with all the celebrities that have been on the show in the past in the audience. It was very self-aware, not only of the tropes of TV shows and season finales in general, but also with the show's own fanbase, and their expectations and opinions of things. A lot of the endings for the characters they used seemed like short versions of what a conclusion to their arc could actually be. I especially liked the real Principal Skinner coming back. However, Bart is having none of it, and him resisting all this change so much that he actually changed his own reality was kind of cool. I was rooting for him to succeed and stick it to all of these cliché endings. Now, where the episode faltered for me is the repetitive feeling it had. We knew ultimately none of these endings would mean anything, so the more of them happened, the less engaging they got. There was definitely diminishing returns with them, and the "I'm really going to miss this place" was way overdone. That ties into my other main problem, which should shock no one who knows HD Simpsons. This was not that funny. It's all well and good doing another meta, bizarre type story, but it's not going to elevate into something great if there are no massive laughs. So yeah, that's my take on this finale turn premiere. I am interested to know your thoughts on this one especially though, so please drop a comment letting me know. Episode 2, The Yellow Lotus. The Simpsons try to go on a relaxing vacation. However, they get into trouble with the people at the resort, including Sideshow Bob. My trivia for this one is the Simpsons wear the same vacation clothes they wore in the episode, a totally fun thing Bart will never do again. And the best thing about this for me was Sideshow Bob inventing a rake with a collapsed handle. This one gets a 3 out of 5. The holiday type plot here was not particularly original, and the implication that the family have had this decade-long timeshare investment is a bit off-putting. I never like it when it's revealed the family have had more expenses, so therefore more funds available, than they're supposed to have. This also felt like a very forced use of Sideshow Bob. He could have been removed from this episode altogether, and it would have made a little difference. Who cares about him and this random woman, even if she turns out to be a bit of a psycho in the end? The side plot, if I can even call it that, of Dr. Hibbert, and more pertinently his wife, being hooked on pills was a total nothing burger. Despite all of these lackluster things being present, this episode was saved by a few things I did enjoy. The family's hijinks at the Yellow Lotus resort were decent. Bits like the kids in Kids Club and Homer messing around in the pool. Everyone was acting in character like you would expect them to, trying to have whatever fun they can at a resort like this. The jabs at rich people and timeshare salesmen were accurate, but of course they are kind of easy targets. There was also some pandering going on, with some callbacks to classic gags for sure. They really are milking the Homer hedge one lately. However, the Bob rake one worked, because they put a twist on it. To stop the head bops, Bob figured out a way to shorten the handle, only now he gets bopped in the balls instead. I thought that was a clever little gag. Episode 3, Desperately Seeking Lisa. Lisa has a misadventure in the dark world of Capital City's art scene, so parts of the plot here is similar to the movie After Hours. And my best moment was Marge sensing that Lisa drank the sugary juice she gave her. This one gets, say, 2 out of 5. From my point of view, this series has always struggled making episodes solely about Lisa's love for art. Not because it isn't a good or interesting topic, they just never seem to do it well. Now, this wasn't elementary school musical levels of bad, but it was still lackluster. The setup of Patty and Selma taking Lisa to Capital City wasn't too bad, but as soon as we bumped into one of their artsy friends, all went downhill. He, along with a bunch of his pals, try buttering Lisa up with promises of success. However, they end up turning on her in an effort to exploit her. Now, this would have made more sense had it been like an 18-year-old up-and-coming artist or something, but doing this to an 8-year-old prodigy just seems odd, especially since it turns into a bunch of grown adults chasing said 8-year-old through the city in the middle of the night. Just creepy if you actually think about it. The ending with Lisa floating back to Springfield on a giant inflatable balloon was also rather silly. Oh, I should also mention the Superintendent Chalmers subplot. It goes nowhere and ends up being completely pointless. Just a few random scenes of him bumping into Lisa on the street. To come up with a few positives, other than my fave moment, which I liked just because it's nice to believe that Marge has this kind of sixth sense for what her kids are doing. I did like some of the jabs at modern art, and some of the animation of the art pieces was lively, colourful and catches your attention, but that's about all the good I can say. Episode 4, Shoddy Heat. An unearthed corpse opens up a cold case from the 1980s. It seems to implicate Grandpa, Agnes Skinner and Mr. Burns, so Lisa is determined to find out the truth. My trivia for this one is the building number for Simpson and O'Donnell Detective Agency is 3516, which is this episode's production code. My best moment was any of the bits really of Lisa trying to solve the mystery. This one gets, say, 3 out of 5. The suspense of the story didn't exactly have me on the edge of my seat, and adding even more backstory to Abe and Burns is pushing it. But Agnes Skinner, on the other hand, hooking up with them in the past is something fresh. Given we know almost nothing about her past, there was almost too much going on here actually. There was shades of a murder mystery, shades of a Bart and Lisa team up, and even bits of both a romance and a backstory episode. Not that any of this was badly done. I liked the scenes of Lisa trying to figure things out, and her treating Bart like a kid, but him liking it. The Heatwave intro had the odd funny gag, as did Bart and Lisa spending time with Patty and Selma at the DMV. But the ending here was a big negative. Apparently Homer could never be fired, due to a deal Burns made with Abe about covering up Billy's disappearance. Obviously this messes up continuity, and it's so in your face. It's not in a minor way, it's in a I can't ignore it type of way. It contradicts so much of the show, like the running Burns character trait of not knowing Homer's name. And I'm pretty sure Homer has even been fired before, so this whole thing is out the window. I know they wanted to again show Abe trying his best for his son, but this wasn't the best way to go about doing it. This ending almost made me drop this down to a 2, but I didn't mind watching the episode overall. Most of it was okay, so I'll be kind and keep it at a 3. Episode 5, Treehouse of Horror 35. The 3 short stories this year are The Information Rag, The Fall of the House of Monty, and Denim. My trivia is that the Raven from the very first Treehouse of Horror makes a cameo in the second segment. My favourite moment here was the denim jeans trying to kill Marge. This year's Treehouse of Horror gets a 3 out of 5. The first part was topical at the time, given the US election that was going on. It was interesting to have these giant red and blue monsters, representing like the Republican and the Democrats' hatred towards each other, was a decent metaphor for all the division in the country, or at least hatred between the voters anyway. I would question if any of these politicians at the top of either party actually really hate each other, but that's another matter. Still, there was no actual specific satire here, more just vague implications. The fight between these two monsters was not that entertaining, which is kind of odd given that they were destroying everything in town. Bart and Lisa teaming up to control a giant robot to destroy them also sounds much cooler than it actually was. Part 2 was probably the weakest of the 3. It was a lame story about Burns from the past, abusing his workers, and being haunted by their ghosts. This whole segment lacked energy. The ghost thing has been done better before, as has Burns being this rich evil guy. The jump scare gag kind of summed it up. When you make even a jump scare tame and boring, you know you're lacking some serious juice. At least this episode ended stronger. The final part was my favourite. The animation of the genes was decent, especially in the scenes involving all the other genes from his home planet. The relationship between Homer and the genes was interesting. They had some fun together, but you just knew things would end up going very wrong. The genes going rogue, trying to get rid of Marge by taking control of everyone's legs, was just a funny visual. I also kind of liked the ending twist, where Homer chose the genes over Marge. Obviously this would be totally out of character for him normally, but hey, this is a Treehouse of Horror, why not take the chance to have him betray her? This was okay by normal episode standards, but still slightly disappointing for a Treehouse of Horror. It definitely lacked some edge and horror elements. Episode 6, Women in Shorts. We see many short stories about the women of Springfield. So the Malibu Stacy segment is a reference to the 2023 film Barbie, and my best moment was the teachers all taking bets on what happens to the kids at recess. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. A Simpsons episode focusing more on the female characters was probably well overdue, to be honest. It's not representation for the sake of it, simply for the reason that many of these characters have been left underdeveloped over the years. So there is a bit of potential there worth exploring. They tried popping into many of their lives, almost 22 short film style. I think my favourite skits were the tampon buying one, with Marge and Homer, and the Helen Lovejoy one, where she goes mad thinking the world is about to end, kissing Moe, and destroying her husband's train set. Although it was quite short, I also liked seeing how Agnes is so petty, she always needs a rival to bitch about. A lot of people are like that in real life. They're not happy unless they're moaning about someone. My favourite of all though, was the betting the teachers did about the kids on the playground. The odds they have up on the board seem quite fair and balanced, with Wendell being even money to be the first one to puke, or Milhouse being the favourite to cry, which of course he did. Episode 7, Treehouse of Horror presents Simpsons Wicked This Way Comes. A tattooed man at a mysterious night circus transports Lisa into 3 strange stories from the 1950s. My trivia for this one is that the action figure that Krusty pulls down to open the secret door is that of Stewie Griffin, and my best moment was Bart's determination to save Kirk from being buried alive. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. Despite this masquerading as a change of format, it still had the vibe of a normal trilogy episode. In reality there wasn't much to the first segment, just Bart running around trying to get people to believe him about this woman who has been buried alive. It's just how determined he is to save her I like. Bart using his stubbornness for good is always nice to see. Now the twist that it was Kirk who was buried there was obvious after the scene of Luann trying to make Bart fall asleep, but it was still decently funny regardless. The middle segment was a very by the numbers robot thing, with them becoming sentient and taking over. No great satire really, and the violence was kind of there, but too tame to be entertaining by itself. The final part, where only prestige TV is allowed, was an interesting angle. Homer of course wants to go back to just fun for the sake of it type shows, but the powers that be won't allow that, literally hunting him down every time he tries to watch some carefree comedy. Bart's questions about how in-depth the stories are was also a very observant take. I do find that nowadays in general, a lot of people, especially younger people believe it or not, seem to prefer a deep story and some kind of substance over pure comedy. I personally can like both if well done, but if I'm tuning into a comedy show, that is what will take precedence for me. If I wanted a drama-filled experience with deep convoluted plots, I would watch a drama show. Overall, List, like most trilogy episodes, was decent, watchable, but never came close to being great. Episode 8, Convenience Airways. The Simpsons are trapped on a flight with the most unruly passengers in America. My trivia for this one is during Homer's big speech in the plane's jail, one of the background characters is based on Cameron Poe from the movie Con Air, and my best moment was Bart making fun of the flight attendant's lame jokes. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. It's interesting that they thought of basing an episode around the family being stuck on a flight with the worst possible group of people, but for anyone who has been on a few economy flights, I'm sure you can relate to at least some of the things which went on here. The main thing in this episode's favour is that the characters were all in character. Bart was being the clownish prankster he often is, showing up the guy's cliché jokes and making everyone laugh. Lisa was trying to take care of Maggie, but kept thinking her sax playing would do the trick, seemingly forgetting that not everyone loves it as much as her. Homer was the more complex one. He was genuinely trying his best to not cause a scene after promising Marge not to, and he actually put up with a lot. One can hardly blame him for his little crash out at the end. The trapdoor stuff was a decent twist, locking everyone into a kind of plane jail, except for Marge, who slept the whole flight away in first class. I kinda wish they played up the suspense of that a bit more, to be honest, having Homer try to figure out where everyone else went. The ending courtroom scene with Mr. Burns was okay, but the ending gag of Marge getting trapdoored as she started moralizing was quite funny, as was the end credits parody of a flight safety video. Again, this was on the lower end of a 4. I could just as easily have given a 3, but I had to choose one, and I felt there was just enough good moments to make it worthwhile. Episode 9, Homer and Her Sisters. After a fight in an escape room, Homer works on fixing his relationship with Patty and Selma. So the title of this episode is a reference to the 1986 comedy drama film Hannah and Her Sisters. My best moment, which might seem kind of morbid, but it was the giant sign falling on and killing Sadie. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. Lem trying to find a new angle on Homer's relationship with his sister-in-laws is a tricky thing to do. This was covered quite extensively, not only in the classic era, but on the odd occasion after that too. They tried to find some new material here. After their big bust-up in the escape room, I do find it interesting how Patty and Selma of all people have a proud perfect escape room record. Maybe watching all that MacGyver finally came in handy. The way they tried to change things up was by having this overbearing TV therapist come in saying they should be friends, and that Marge was actually the problem, getting in the way of their friendship all these years. Now, Marge does like being the moral authority, there's no doubt about that, but you can hardly blame her for some of her husband and sister's behaviour towards each other. She genuinely tries to make peace most of the time in good faith. The scenes of Homer, Patty and Selma's uneasy alliance while they were hanging out together were decent, but you could tell there was no real chemistry there. Their annoyance at being around each other was bound to rear its head eventually. This was one time going back to the status quo was the only option which really made sense. We also get a side plot here for the first time in a while, but I wasn't too enthralled with it. Krusty tries to mingle with the common folk, which did absolutely nothing for me. It felt like a waste of time. And as I said, I wasn't a big fan of the Sadie stuff. She's just so unlikable. Now, maybe she didn't quite deserve to get killed, but I do think it worked as a surprising ending. I had no idea they were going to end on a dark note like that. Episode 10. Oh come on all ye faithful. Homer gets hypnotized and mistakenly believes he is Santa Claus. Meanwhile, Ned starts to question his religious beliefs. So this is the first episode to premiere exclusively on Disney Plus instead of broadcast TV. Indeed, this is the first Disney Plus episode. On this occasion it's an hour long, but I've decided to, for the sake of simplicity, just treat it like an episode of the season, the same as any other. My best moment here was Ned and Frink in the submarine. The first Disney special gets a 4 out of 5. Being a full-length 40-minute plus episode, this did have a different feel to a normal one. Even the previous episodes this show has done about Christmas or religion, the first thing you notice is the story got more time to breathe here. And they mostly put that to good use, I think, giving lots of side characters some screen time, and having some subtle yet meaningful moments between characters. Like Marge thanking Bart for listening, or Rod and Todd actually behaving like normal kids and brothers for a change. I don't have too much to say about Homer being hypnotized into thinking he was Santa by this English guy. There were some decent moments to come from it, and it was fun to see a Homer and Ralph pairing, as brief as it was. I kind of wish they spent a bit more time on that, to be honest. Despite all the other stuff going on, it was quite clear that Ned's faith crisis was the emotional driving force of the episode. Good job it was too, because I think they handled it well. We have had hints in the past of Ned or his kids starting to question their religion, but this was the most human take on it by far. Given all the tragic losses Ned has had to go through, it's only natural someone in his position would start to ask questions. If a loving, all-powerful God really exists, and I believe in him and pray to him, why has all this bad stuff happened, and why am I not getting a clear sign, either from him or from my deceased wives who are now supposedly in heaven or whatever? These are questions no one truly has the answer to, and to this episode's credit, it never pretended to have any answers. It basically says that everyone living their life is on their own spiritual journey, whether they are aware of it or not. People will believe in or not believe in all kinds of different things, and that's fine. Just do whatever you need to do to make you happiest, and whatever helps you get by. After all, just being here having this human experience, as Lisa points out, is somewhat of a miracle in itself, and you should try to make the best of it. This episode wasn't telling you to believe in anything, but it did try and encourage you to have a bit of an open mind to different perspectives. The ending scene in the sub was great for this, not only for getting Ned his belief back, but it was also nice that Frink basically admitted that he doesn't know the truth. He can't say for sure that there's no God or afterlife or anything. It's actually the wise scientific thing to have somewhat of an open mind and acknowledge that our understanding of reality, for one, it's always limited, but even from what we can observe and perceive, it's always changing. That's what true science is after all. Never-ending inquiry. It will almost certainly never fully be settled. Now, I'm not sure the reveal that the sub was fake and the whole situation was set up by the English guy was entirely necessary, but it was somewhat clever how they kind of left the supernatural element vague by not discovering how the wooden yoke got there. Ultimately, whether you be an atheist, a Christian, a Buddhist like Lisa, or a believer in any other religion, I think you will find this episode was respectful to your beliefs. Another thing to note here was some nice animation, especially in Lisa's turtle story and underwater in the sub. What holds this back from being a true classic for me was the comedy. Again, it was fine. This episode was not built for too many wacky moments anyway, but I would have liked a few more laughs over the 40 plus minutes. I will say that Ned swearing at Frink when he thinks they are down to ridiculously low depths was quite funny. Kind of caught me by surprise, but a totally understandable reaction, for sure. Above all else, I'm just glad they actually took a bit of pride in this Disney Plus special and made it a worthwhile experience. Episode 11, The Man Who Flew Too Much. A trip to Capital City for the State Bowling Championship goes wrong when a helicopter crash leaves the Pin Pals stranded on a mountain. So some continuity about this one is that Mr. Burns references the original Team Homer episode with his t-shirt, "I was a Pin Pal before it was cool," and my best moment was just the early scene celebrating the Pin Pals. That might give you a bit of an insight into the rating here, which is a 1 out of 5. I was not expecting this to be a 1 halfway through. It was on course to just be a run-of-the-mill, slightly mediocre episode. But by the end, everything felt so hollow and meaningless that I was worn down by it, honestly. Obviously, the crash into a mountain, turning into a survival story, is about as unoriginal as it gets. So many TV shows have done this concept over the years. So for this to be worthwhile, it had to do something a bit different to stand out. It simply didn't though. There was a bunch of unfunny scenes of the team struggling on the mountain, with them all starting to turn on each other, and Mo suggesting cannibalism on the supposedly dead Portuguese guy, while Ned tries his best to save his life. Meanwhile, there was a bunch of scenes of the family missing Homer, which had no emotion to them. We all of course knew they would be okay in the end, and Marge basically gave away the ending by saying that Homer will somehow miraculously save the day. I mean, he was dead to rights, buried deep in the snow, all frozen up, and suddenly he sees a vision of his mum in hell, which I'm not a fan of, and that's enough to get him almost superhuman powers. Even the Portuguese guy somehow survives and makes his way back down the mountain. Sure, why not? While we're at it, why not have all the corpses up there suddenly spring back to life and make their way back down too? Sorry for my attitude here, but this one just annoyed me. It was such lazy writing, frankly. I half expected this to all be revealed to be a dream or something. As bad as that would have been, it may have still been better than this. The biggest problem above all else is that instead of exploring their characters in a meaningful way, they all came off like cardboard cutouts for a cliché plot. And after all the actual good character writing of the previous episode, that was a massive shame. Episode 12, Bottle Episode. Homer and Smithers are assigned the task of transporting a wine once owned by Napoleon. However, Marge uses the wine, so they have to do a cover-up. My trivia for this one is that Smithers and Marge are depicted as Fox versions of Robin Hood and Maid Marian from the 1973 Disney film version of Robin Hood, and my best moment was mainly the bits of Marge and Smithers working together. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I think I've mentioned it before in the episodes where they've interacted, that Marge and Smithers have an interesting dynamic. They always seem to bring the best out of each other, so it makes sense them teaming up to channel their inner Robin Hood. Once again we get another look into Smithers, and his constant moral dilemma about working for Burns. So when he sees the opportunity to make counterfeit wine to benefit the less fortunate, it seems to him like a victimless crime and an obvious thing to do. It makes sense, even though the ending twist here is that Burns was actually the one who got them off the hook in the end by bribing the judge. So basically things ended up okay for everyone. Burns got to keep his rich ego intact because all the rich people were fooled by Professor Frink's counterfeit wine, and Marge and Smithers got to keep helping people. In terms of the jokes, there were a few I found funny, one being the revelation that Homer punched a hole in the wall through his safe just because Major League Baseball introduced a shot clock. I also like them going to Moe for expert alcohol advice, only for him to go, "Wine's the red one, right?" Outside of the safe joke, the bits with Homer featuring heavily were probably the weakest parts here, which is a good sign. They weren't even that bad or anything, but I did find the cover-up song slightly underwhelming. Episode 13, The Past and the Furious. In an alternate reality, all plants have disappeared, so Lisa must go back in time to put things right. My trivia for this one is Professor Frink's whiteboard contains many references to the TARDIS, the time machine from Doctor Who, and my best moment was Lisa and Burns' song. This one gets a 3 out of 5. Another Disney Plus special, but I don't have anywhere near as much to say about this one. As much as they tried to dress it up with a sparkly premise, it's still just a non-canon episode, which features nothing long-lasting about any of the characters. Sure, some Lisa and Burns interactions were fine, I actually kind of liked their little song, but when the stakes don't feel real, like the whole environmental stuff didn't really here, it's hard for an episode to stand out. Still, there was some decent old-timey animation, and some references to the 1920s. I don't know how correct it all is. Maybe any history buffs out there could let me know. Either way, I do think that's when this episode is at its best, when it's leaning into the time travel stuff. It is just an average episode though, I'm struggling to say much more, so I'll just move on. Episode 14, The Flanches of Inner Simpson. Homer finally pushes Flanders too far, and he starts ignoring him completely. So the title here is a reference to the 2022 film, The Banshees of Inisherin. My best moment was Homer and Ned's realization. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Well, it certainly started out lively enough, with Bart getting into DJing. Him having this rowdy treehouse party in the middle of the night, with seemingly everyone in town showing up, was completely over the top and unrealistic, but I kind of liked it. It's always nice seeing Bart embrace his more creative and rowdy side, and he got to do both at once here. Ned had the right to be pissed about it though. He couldn't get any sleep with all the racket, and Homer didn't seem to care. Now the Homer Flanders stuff was like a retelling of the many feuds they have had over the years. Ned getting annoyed at Homer trying to take back his borrowed stuff, while Marge is there in the middle of it all. But I did like how Ned did not immediately accept Homer's nice worded apology. In fact, him getting even more angered by it was a good pivot. Now that he knows Homer is aware of the bad things he does, and how it affects Ned, that does kind of make his actions seem even worse. Now say what you want about the counselling and the hallucinations ending, but if nothing else it was a fresh spin on Homer and Ned's arguing. The revelation that, deep down, the two of them actually kind of want and need each other, and like the status quo. I kind of get it. And hell, if we have to go back to normal anyway, the characters might as well be on board with it. Episode 15, The Last Man Expanding. All of Springfield becomes hooked on a magical weight loss drug. Well, everyone except Homer. My trivia for this one is Opal buying a weight loss program is referencing when Oprah Winfrey brought a 10% stake in Weight Watchers in 2015. It was kind of hard to pick one solid best moment here, so I just went with some of the general satire, which I'll hopefully explain properly in a minute. This one gets a 2 out of 5. I am struggling to see the appeal of this one. I found it a bit freaky, honestly, seeing all the fat Springfieldian characters become skinny thanks to these dubious drugs they took, especially at the end, with the loose skin on their faces, flapping around. Some of the characters felt a bit out of character too, like skinny people taking the drugs, and how Marge was suddenly so concerned about Homer's weight. She's never seemed to care in the past, not for the most part anyway. In the end, everything of course goes back to normal, so I don't really see what the point of this was. Nothing good came out of it, no good character stuff or funny moments. As I said, the only somewhat redeeming thing here was some of the decent satire, both on the social pressure people feel to look skinny, and people's over-reliance on drugs. Not to mention Big Pharma's insistence on getting people on as many drugs as possible, because of course that helps their bottom line. That's a bit of a problem in current society in general, in my humble opinion. All this stuff being slightly referenced was not enough to make this a good episode though. Episode 16. P.S. I hate you. Marge discovers that her secret box of hate letters has gone from the closet. Soon a blackmailer threatens to expose all the letters to the townspeople. My trivia for this one is the title comes from the song P.S. I Love You by the Beatles. And my best moment was Marge gaining the confidence to be herself, which is what led to her telling Helen Lovejoy to kiss her ass. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This episode clearly set out with the intention, the goal, to give us more of an insight into how Marge ticks and how she deals with the day-to-day stresses. We know from her history on the show that she is someone who represses her emotions, so it makes total sense she writes angry letters to the people that annoy her, to get her frustrations out so she doesn't have to take them out on people in real life. That's something I can totally imagine her doing. Now the mystery about who stole her box of letters was okay, but it was fairly quickly revealed to be Shauna. You guys know I'm not a fan of hers, but she wasn't too bad here. It's not like I care about her side of things anyway. It's all about what happens to Marge. The scene with Marge and Superintendent Chalmers was okay, when he tries to flirt with her a little bit, even though he knows he shouldn't be doing it. As was the little chase, with Jimbo and Shauna on the bike. Now sure, the ending where Marge has to either save her box or save Shauna was a little cliche, and the letters dropping perfectly to the people they were addressed to was just too perfect. Still, I can accept it as a plot contrivance because at least everything is now out in the open. Marge doesn't have to hide her true feelings so much anymore. The townspeople even kind of get it. In fact, they now see her as more of a normal person, with nuance rather than just being known as the nice lady. As I said, I did like the ending where Marge tells Helen to kiss her ass. She deserved it after all the nonsense she was sprouting. In fact, most of the townspeople deserved to be called out by Marge, let's be real. So yeah, there was some nice character moments here. I feel like I understand Marge a bit more, and feel like the character genuinely gained something from this experience, so all good stuff. Now this was never designed to be the funniest episode, but there were a few entertaining moments, like Helen and Agnes arguing in church. Those two are made for each other, honestly. I love how they drag in Skinner and Reverend Lovejoy to do their dirty work for them. Another thing I noticed in this episode's favour was some increased fluidity in the animation, especially with slightly more expressive movements from the characters. Certainly more than we're used to seeing in the HD era. It was really needed here as well to sell all the emotions Marge was going through. Episode 17. Yellow Planet. The Simpsons are reimagined as animals in a Natural Geographic style nature documentary. So, in the ocean we see creatures resembling SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star, as well as Ursula from The Little Mermaid. My best moment was Luana and Kirk Van Houten as mantises. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. Like the last Disney Plus one, this too was a gimmick episode, this time having Homer and Marge as whales, and the whole story being framed as some kind of nature documentary. In fairness, they did capture part of the boring, low energy vibe a lot of those shows have, but as you can imagine, it doesn't make for an entertaining Simpsons episode. The Homer-Marge conflict, where he lies to her, was so hard to care about. Their arguments have been so played out in their human lives. Why is it any more compelling now they're suddenly whales? The jokes here were entirely based on pointing out the features of the different animals, whether it be the whales fighting with their horns, or the female mantises eating the male after mating, which isn't even fully accurate by the way. Apparently that's a pretty rare thing for them to do, especially in the wild. Still, picking Kirk and Luan for that makes perfect sense at least. If they focused on more of these secondary characters as different animals, maybe this could have been better. They could have made this into like a 22 short films episode only featuring animals instead. That would have been something different. Instead we got a Homer-Marge love story and an ocean land ending which was just Well, I don't even know what it was just there. I have no feelings towards it, frankly. I better move on, before I really tie myself in knots trying to talk about this episode. Episode 18, Abe League of Their Mo. Grandpa and Mo form a friendship after watching some baseball together. They even manage to recruit a Macedonian superstar to play for Springfield. My trivia for this one is that Volkov is learning English from Family Guy, so he often says Quagmire's giggity catchphrase. That's the second Family Guy reference this season. My best moment was Abe getting to see the success of the Springfield Isotopes with Bart. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This was an average episode all round. It was nice for Abe to make a friend in Mo, which also led him to finally getting to enjoy baseball with his grandson Bart, like he did with his grandfather as a wee boy. Now sure, Mo kind of lets the success of the team and his job as translator go to his head, causing a rift between him and Abe. They do mostly make up in the end at least, but some of the stuff along the way wasn't that convincing. Now the Volkov character was fairly one note, and not that entertaining really. He was some rare representation for North Macedonia though, I guess. Now the second half conflict was mainly about the whole commercialization of baseball and sport in general, and how everything seems to be sponsored by gambling companies nowadays. Now I'm not a baseball fan, and I'm not aware of the particular incident this episode was referencing, with a star player betting on the sport they play, but this happens in all sports worldwide. There have been many instances of pro players getting suspended or worse for betting on games. This does set a bad example, of course, as we see in this episode as Bart gets hooked on sports betting. Now I will be honest, I have never really had much of a moral issue with gambling and sports betting. It's always been legal in the UK if you're over 18, so I have done my fair share of it. I've actually got into it a lot more in the last year or so actually. Betting on golf is my jam. I hope to hit the winner of the upcoming US Open. Wish me luck. So given I do it myself, it would be hypocritical of me to condemn gambling on sports. That said, some people do get addicted to it, so that's something you need to watch out for. Of course, you should only gamble what you can afford to lose. Like most things, gambling has its pros and cons, but I'm definitely on the side of it should be legal, rather than trying to force it underground, because that's all you could do. You're never going to stop people gambling on stuff. This episode didn't seem to give a solid stance though either way. It just kind of floated the issue out there for people to make their own mind up on, which is fine, as this episode had other things going on anyway. Episode 19, Stewie Lies. Homer gets involved with a celebrity chef, which soon gets him into trouble with the mob. So Luigi's line, "We asked could we make it, we never asked should we make it," is referencing Dr. Ian McClone's line in Jurassic Park. My best moment here was the chase with Fat Tony and the Prussians. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The first 4 or so minutes of this was Bart relentlessly copying every word Lisa says, after he loses front seat privileges to her. I had mixed feelings about this. It does get under Lisa's skin, so credit to Bart for his persistence. This apparently goes on for months. On the other hand though, it's not exactly witty, and I did find it mildly annoying after a while if I'm honest. Still, the episode moves on from that for good, apart from an end credit scene with Kang and Kodos. The focus shifts to Homer and this TV chef called Thad. Homer gets to take him to a restaurant where he smells the scent of a delightful stew. They follow it to Fat Tony's house. I do quite like the idea that Fat Tony's a cook, although the bits of his backstory trying to keep the recipe hidden from the guy's son was meh. To be honest, that Fit Tony episode forever threw me off when it comes to Tony's background. My own fault for letting continuity bother me, but I think it still has a subconscious effect on how I see things with the character. Anyway, turns out Thad was a bit of an idiot and decides to steal the recipe from a mafia boss. This leads to a wild chase between Tony, Homer and Thad, and the Prussians who get wind of the recipe because it's been leaked. It all ends up being for nothing anyway, since the recipe has got out to everyone in town and everyone is now using it. However, Maximilian, who was the old guy's son from the flashback, forgives everyone because he feels his father's legacy is being kept alive through everyone's enjoyment of the stew. That makes some sense, but again, I can hardly call it a great character moment or anything, just an average watchable episode. Episode 20. Full Heart, Empty Pool. Homer and Grandpa team up to create a new sport called Noodle Ball. It gets very popular, but complications soon arise. The title here is a reference to the 1993 song Full Moon Empty Heart by Belly, and my best moment was Homer's Wikipedia page. This one gets a 2 out of 5. Although nothing was egregiously bad here, this is exactly the type of episode which exposes this era of the show in my opinion. As this season shows, they can sometimes get by with unique premises or solid character writing, but this one mostly played by the numbers and took no risks. It was a Homer-Grandpa conflict type story we have seen a million times before, with the rather predictable ending of them going back to square one, having blown their business opportunity while forgiving each other. So when you have a plot like this, all they have to fall back on is the comedy, and like a lot of modern episodes, this was found wanting in that respect. I did kind of like Homer's wiki page about how incompetent he is, with the picture of him trapped in the bridge. However, the context of that made little sense. Like, why is Homer so concerned over his legacy all of a sudden? Especially when given all of his previous life experiences, he must have some kind of a legacy already secured. The avocado stuff also seemed to come out of nowhere, and never really had a purpose. They also looked to be going somewhere, with the battle over the pools between the old folks and the younger people, but that was another plot point, which was brought up never to be relevant. This season does seem to be running out of steam slightly at this point, but let's hope it finishes strong with Episode 21, Is Stranger Things. When Bart and Lisa stop watching Itchy and Scratchy together, Marge fears they'll start to drift apart. We then take a leap forward in time to see how they turned out. My trivia for this one is the ending with Marge and Ringo Starr married in heaven is a callback to her teenage crush on him from Brush with Greatness. My best moment overall was all the bits of Bart taking care of and throwing parties for Homer and his old pals. The season finale gets a 3 out of 5. Like most future episodes, this is non-canon, so will just inevitably end up being lumped into the ever-growing lore of the grown-up Simpsons. Still, the flash-forward bits at the start with a 6 and 4-year-old Bart and Lisa watching Itchy and Scratchy was nice. It was cool to see how the tradition of watching that show together started for them. Once the episode got going, I thought it was going to be yet another example of grown-up Bart being a loser, while Lisa is this successful businesswoman who has to morally look down at him. At first it looked like this, when Bart has taken Homer and his friends out of the retirement home and wastes all the money Lisa has been sending on buying fancy cars and having stripper parties. So it's slightly understandable Lisa gets the wrong impression and reports him, but it turns out that Bart was actually taking care of the old folks. He treats them with dignity and empathy. Well, actually no, those were just the names of some of these strippers, but the point stands. Let's be real too, rotting away in a nursing home isn't as good as living it up, with Bart having these wild parties and actually enjoying the last part of your life. It was also a fresh take, having Marge die before Homer for once. I don't think that's happened in any of the previous future episodes. I can imagine old Homer kind of being lost without Marge, so that makes it even better that Bart decided to look after him. The ending of Bart and Lisa saving their dad from Florida was fine, and their reliance on an old Itchy and Scratchy episode to do it was a nice callback. This took a while to get going and suffered a bit because of the future episode fatigue I and many others have at this point, but it did enough to be enjoyable for the most part and showed that yes, Bart can actually step up if need be. So with that, we have all the episodes of season 36 done. And here is the summary of the latest season of The Simpsons. The overall average score was 3, bang on, which is pretty much identical to the previous 3 seasons. My least favourite episodes of the season were Full Heart Empty Pool at 5, Yellow Planet at 4, Desperately Seeking Lisa at 3, The Last Man Expanding at 2, and as the sole 1 out of 5, The Man Who Flew Too Much was the worst. My Fab 5 for the season were all 4 out of 5s actually, and there were indeed a few 4s which missed out as well, but the ones which made the list were Bottle Episode at 5, The Flanches of Inner Simpson at 4, Women in Shorts at 3, P.S. I Hate You at 2, and Oh Come On All Ye Faithful as the best. And although there were no 5 out of 5s here, the top 2 on the list were both kind of close to it. They were better than your average 4 out of 5 episode, let's just leave it at that. So, as already discussed, this season was more of the same, very similar to the previous 3, both in terms of quality and the type of episodes being produced. So instead of going over the individual episodes again, which I hopefully covered fully in the reviews, I want to use this end of video recap time to take a step back and take stock at where the series is currently at. Since season 33, it has been hovering around the 3 out of 5 mark, which is decent, watchable, certainly way better than most of the HD era. In fact, it aligns very much with the teen seasons, or more specifically seasons 11 or 12 to 19 or 20. This era even does some things better than that era. I think the character writing is better largely. Lately the characters are not as annoying, and they go deeper into why they act the way they do. There is also a wider variety of episode types, lots of format changes, with interesting premises etc. But if you were to make me choose, I would still probably give the middle seasons the edge over these current ones, simply because the average episode from that era was funnier. There are way more memorable jokes and moments from that era I can point to. Maybe that partly comes from the wackier nature of the plots, so sure there may be some kind of trade-off going on, but there doesn't have to be a trade-off. The classic era obviously had both. Great character writing and it was very funny. Now that is a hard thing to do, don't mistake me, not many shows can do it. I'm not expecting these seasons to be as good as the show's best. I am honestly grateful that the series is no longer a pain to get through. If I had one wish for future seasons though, it would be for the comedy to become more of the main focus again. That may be a case of be careful what you wish for, I know that, but I think some of the new writers on the show, they have nowadays, would be capable of it, while maintaining the likability of the characters. I think that would improve the series quite a bit, if they managed to pull it off. Anyway, just some food for thought. I'm sure the higher-ups at The Simpsons are going to listen to me, regardless of whether they do or not. That's my State of the Union on the show. Please let me know your feelings on the current version of The Simpsons. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon, so I will be back in a year's time, God willing, to do season 37 when that inevitably rolls around. I hope to see you all again then, and in the meantime, when you're free to enjoy any of the other content I put out. Thanks guys, and as always, take care.